The great mystic and philosopher Maharal introduced this idea of positive poverty. Welcome to Jewish Meditation with Rabbi G. Last week we completed the series on calm living. For the next 3 weeks, we will do a mini-series on pre-Pesach meditations. This is the festival when we became the Jewish nation. We were free from Egypt and became God's people. So for the next 3 weeks, we will spend just a short time on different aspects of this amazing festival. And today is Pre-Pesach Meditations Part 1. So we know that when Pesach comes along, the key mitzvah almost is eating of matzah. First 2 nights of Seder. In Israel it's only 1 night, diaspora 2 nights. There's a mitzvah to eat a large size, a large portion of shmura matzah. And that seems to be very focal to the whole experience of Pesach. Now, we all know from our young education when we were in preschool that the reason we eat matzah on Pesach is because when the Jewish people left Egypt, they were rushed out and there was no time to break bread, there was no time for the dough to rise, hence we ate matzah, which is certainly one idea. However, that begs the following question. Matzah is therefore a symbol of freedom. Now, on the Seder night, we do some things to do with freedom. We do some things like bitter herbs to remember the slavery. Matzah is a symbol of our freedom because we left Egypt, we didn't have time to bake bread. But yet, in the Haggadah, matzah is referred to as lechem oni, not only in the Haggadah and the Torah, bread of affliction, poor man's bread as it's called. How does poor man's bread, essentially a poor man doesn't add a lot of fancy ingredients to their dough and so on, it's very plain, it's broken. But how does poor man's bread become the symbol of our freedom? And here is where the great mystic and Kabbalist, the Maharal of Prague, the philosopher, introduces the idea of positive poverty. Of course, financial poverty is debilitating. But there's a kind of spiritual poverty, which is normally a bad thing, but it's a kind of spiritual poverty which is good. And that has to do with matzah and has to do with the essence of the whole festival of Pesach. Pesach is about freedom. Not about remembering the freedom of 3,300 years ago, but it's about re-experiencing spiritual freedom. It's about re-experience the story of the Exodus from Egypt. And essentially what that means, it means freedom from ourselves. When we talk about freedom does not mean, from the Jewish perspective at least, freedom doesn't mean that we are free to do what we want. That's actually called a prison. That's incarcerating ourselves. That's being trapped in our own temptation and indulgences and weaknesses. Freedom means free to choose, free to grow, free to do the right thing and the moral thing, free to be connected to something outside of us, to be connected to God and His infinity. The number one barrier to the concept of freedom, of course, is our ego. We're trapped in our own ego. We all have a certain arrogance. So we know when Pesach comes, the first step to freedom is to rid ourselves of our ego. Chametz, bread, represents the rising of self in a negative sense. The negative self, the egocentric self, and that's why chametz on Pesach is prohibited. Whereas matzah doesn't rise at all and doesn't have any ingredients. So the Maharal, this great philosopher, explains that matzah is the first step to freedom because it's stripping ourselves of ourselves. It is positive poverty. It's becoming completely empty of the negative self. It's surrendering ourselves in a complete way. Now, that doesn't mean there's no room for self, but positive self, selfless self, which is a step that comes after matzah. But in order to replace the negative egocentric self with a selfless self, one that surrenders and is connected to something higher than ourselves, we first have to get rid of our ego self. And that's what matzah is. And that's why matzah is, of course, the symbol of freedom, specifically because it is poor man's bread, because we experience self-negation in the positive sense, meaning stripping ourselves of our egocentric self, our negative self completely, so that we create a complete clean slate, a state of nothingness, of emptiness, positive emptiness, so that we can graduate and submit and to surrender to something much greater than ourselves. That is the essence of matzah, and that is the energy that we try and tap into when we eat matzah on Pesach night. It's a powerful mitzvah. It's a powerful time, not just about eating something that tastes like cardboard. It's actually a powerful time. It's that time to tap into the energy of surrender of negative self. So I want to suggest the following meditation, that when Pesach does come around, you can think about while you're eating the matzah, because when we eat the matzah on Pesach night, we're supposed to do it quietly, in a humble state. And when we do that, we can meditate on the following. But before I do that, I just want to mention how important it is to eat shmura matzah on Pesach night. And if you don't have shmura matzah, please contact me, because I can certainly arrange for you to have a nice piece of shmura matzah for the first 2 nights of the Seder. So just get yourself into a comfortable position. Close your eyes slowly and in a relaxed way. And turn your attention to your breathing. Breathing in and out. Just practice being aware for a few moments by focusing on your breath and feeling every time you inhale and every time you exhale. When we focus on our breathing, we've often said neshima, which means breath in Hebrew, comes from as an expression of our neshama, our soul. Think about your soul. Your soul is a spark of godliness. It's an infusion of the divine. It is the space within our consciousness where selflessness lives, purity lives, divineness lives. To access our soul, we must rid ourselves of that which blocks our soul. The negative self, the ego, arrogance, insecurity, self-preservation, self-indulgence. Just think in your mind of the matzah, plain, just water and flour. No ingredients, no rising, flat, almost tasteless. Using that image in your mind, think of getting rid of all your negative ingredients. Surrendering your egocentric self. Letting go of our ego. Letting go of that self which is egocentric. Positive poverty. Divesting and surrendering. As we eat the matzah, experience that feeling of humility, where we've been reduced to a positive state of poverty. Of course, the purpose being to replace the negative self with the selfless self. meaningful self. But to do that, we need to give up the selfish self. Turn your attention back to your breathing. Our breathing expresses our soul, our selflessness, our purity. Just breathe in and out for a few moments and just connect to your soul, connect to your true self. Positive poverty gives room for the soul self, the selfless self, to blossom. As you eat the matzah, think of egocentric self-surrender. Getting rid of the arrogance, the insecurities, creating emptiness to receive and express the selfless soul. Come back to where you are. Think about this concept for the next few weeks as we gear up to Pesach. Preparing for Pesach involves getting rid of the chametz, getting rid of that ego. Thinking about humility. Thinking about not being trapped in self. And then tapping into the energy of humility by eating the matzah on Pesach night. Have a wonderful day.